All right, Jesus is here, so we can get started, I guess, now. What good things, wins or successes, what good things have happened since Tuesday or since last time you were here, whichever, so.
Got 2 appointments.
Awesome, congratulations. With, from SOI, for sale by owners, expired.
Well, one of them's actually a realtor for sale by owners, and then the other one's a for sale by owner.
Nice, awesome. Good job.
I don't know how the realtor one worked out. Like, I just called her and like, hey, like, so I'm a realtor, you know that? And I'm like, yeah. So like, you know that we could actually, you know, probably. Well, I asked her a question. I don't remember what I asked her, but she's like, oh yeah, let's meet up. You know, we can go over that. You know. I'm like, great. Just like
awesome.
The marketing plan or something.
How you doing?
I don't remember
Good
what
to see you. Thank you.
I was actually kind of blown away that she'd like be like, oh, let's meet up. I'm like, what?
Nice.
So
So is she a current agent? Or?
Yeah, she's a current agent. She has an office. Her house is like $700,000. So
she doesn't want to sell her own.
I was like, yeah. Well, I was like, she's like, well, you know, it's you know, location. I'm like, well, sure. And she's like, well, I have like there's other big houses in the neighborhood, so it's probably hard to sell. I'm like, yeah, are you sure you can do it? You know, and I was like, that's probably the very reason we need to get together. You know, and she's like, yeah, let's meet up.
Huh, interesting.
So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to hear. So good, congratulations. So, Anita, you had something.
Yeah, I just barely started cold calling yesterday.
Awesome, good job.
And I didn't do much because I finally got it all set up by like 8 o'clock at night, and I thought I'm just gonna try to do a couple calls before it gets too late.
Yeah.
It was actually a nice segue to say, hey, have you been? And they were FSBOs.
Okay.
Like, have you been bombarded all day? You know, just kind of broke the ice that way. And out of 5 calls, 2 out of the 5 I have callbacks. You know, they basically said I'm waiting to see how things go.
Good.
And one of them was a $725,000 home that
nice.
they're working with an agent to buy their new home, but they don't have anything under contract yet. And they said, and if we don't, you know, sell on our own, we'll utilize them to sell the home. And I said, well, wait a minute, have you interviewed anyone else? Do you know about Century 21 Everest and the fact that we buy and sell about 1 in 3 homes in Utah? And it kept him on the phone with me and allowed it so that I could call him back and see how things were come the end of the weekend when he decided that, or when he decides if he's gonna go with an agent or not.
Awesome.
So that was good. And then kind of similar thing with another person as well. That soundbite of the company was enough to keep them on the phone with me and allow me to call them back in a few days.
Good job. Yeah, awesome. Good job. The other thing to keep in mind on those, especially with like the for sale by owners, is a lot of times I've seen agents that they will call them and think about it. If you were going to try to sell your house for sale by owner and you had thrown it on KSL or whatever, occasionally somebody is doing that because they want agents to call them, but not most of the time, right? Most of the time they want to try it.
I have run into one that was looking
occasionally they will do it with the purpose of getting somebody to call them, but most of the time they really want to try it on their own first. And so because of that, I mean, if you think about it, if it was you and you had thrown it on there wanting to try it by owner just to try it, I mean, if somebody called you the first day, you're not going to be like, oh, all right, well, let's just throw in the towel right now because you called me, right? So I think it is important to keep in mind that now that doesn't mean you can't get appointments with somebody on that first call, but it is important. The main thing I want you to hear is it is going to be calling them 5, 6, 7 times before you get the appointment on one of them.
So that, before I was an agent, that's exactly what I did for sell by owner because I did, you know, I wanted to see what would happen. I put it on KSL. So because I was in that position, when I call FSBOs, I will always say, it's like, I know this just has been up for a few days. You've probably been bombarded with all sorts of agents. And have you guys thought about your plan? Like, you know, if it's not selling for X amount of time, it's going to lose steam. Is that 1 week, 2 weeks? What's your time frame? Because after that, you need a plan to determine what you're going to do. Are you going to decrease the price? Are you going to list with an agent? Just trying to help them figure out what they're doing. And most people just say, oh, we don't really know yet. So, well, then, and that's where I try to help plan and like, okay, well, if that's the case, after 2 weeks, how about we set up a listing, and that way you have plenty of time, you feel like you've given it a good shot, and if it hasn't sold by then I can help you do it.
Great.
Yeah.
Be very convincing for me.
Yeah, just,
Pete's signing up right now.
Great, let's do this.
Cool, good job. What other wins or successes? What good things?
I was gonna share something and
Yeah,
then I blabbed before. So.
That's okay, go for it.
Well, it's been weird. I wanted to prospect, I wanted to cold call and door knock and stuff, but I'm just still trying to set up my SOI, like get everything figured out and reach out to everybody that I know currently. And it's been really busy, which is good. But from my SOI, I've got this tracking sheet of people I'm working with that, for lenders or listing and things like that. And there's 12 people now that I'm working with that they're all working with lenders. Half of them have pre-approvals. Like it's going really well just from the SOI. So that's exciting.
Awesome, yeah, give him a hand on that, good job. And especially I want to really highlight what he's saying is notice it was by calling the SOI. There are so many times that we put that off because of the fear of especially you had even brought up in that if you had a cousin or somebody that really bugged everybody about it.
Well, and I try to, because of that, I'm trying to be a little more jokey too, where I'm just like, hey, so I'm sorry for the shameless plug here, but real estate is all about referrals, and so I just try to make it a little more lighthearted, and then I always end it with like, and you're okay if I follow up with you in a little bit, and
get permission.
So it's been, some people have not responded, some people, there's a good chunk there, and from what you were talking about, that's really helped change my mindset of great, I'll clear those out so I can move in the good ones.
Yeah. So crucial that you do it that way. If we want to find the people who don't want it, because then we can get rid of them and raise that bar so that we have a higher standard of what's in there. So good, awesome, congratulations. Good. Who else? What other wins or successes? Pete.
I officially broke ties.
Yeah, he's officially an agent now. So. Get to work, dude. Just to
I'm gonna get on the hockey beat. Transient.
Oh, are you going door? Yeah, that's a good team to go out with.
Yeah.
Aggressive.
It is simple.
Yeah.
I'm so and so from Century 21. Are you looking to buy or sell real estate?
Yeah.
Or a home?
It's great.
That's it.
And then build on it from there. But yeah, absolutely great way to start. So cool, good job. Good. Who else? Wins or successes?
I closed on my buyers buying their house.
Nice. Congratulations. Awesome.
I got a few good suspects coming up.
Some other good links coming. Good. Awesome. Good. And he was most excited.
Yeah, and I got my signs.
He's got his signs ready. So, which I understand those white ones, if you see them at night driving, I haven't seen them, but yeah, they just really, it's because it's more of like a reflector.
He sold me on that too. I was like, yeah, I'll get the.
I'm sold on the name on that one.
Curtis Fergus, huh?
Curtis Fergus.
Huh? It's awesome.
They remember.
They do. I'll never forget.
So good. All right. Well, good. What questions do you have before we get going today? Any specific questions you want help with on anything?
This may sound really funny, but all the real estate that I've done in the past has been mostly just private parties, so we haven't really done a lot of agent stuff. And my husband was usually dealing with the commission and things like that if we ever did. What is it that sets us apart as far as the 7%? Is that a 7% on just one side of the transaction, or is that for selling their home and then going out and helping them purchase a new one?
Yeah, good question. So let me make sure I understand really what you're asking though. Is when you're saying the 7%, meaning why can we charge 7%? Or
well, I know there's no standard. I know
Yeah.
that. I know you can throw a number out there, and as long as it's a set price, right, or a set price or a set percentage, you can do that. But is that kind of an industry norm? Around covering around that 7%.
Okay. So most of the companies, most of the name brand companies, that's a great question in terms of the 7% commission. Most of the name brand companies on their contract, it probably says 7%. Although I have noticed with a lot of the companies moving to dot loop now that they've just left it as a blank thing rather than having it filled in, other companies. But most of them will usually put it at 7%, but I would say very, very few actually really then go in and actually do it. Most agents, in fact, will, when they're preparing the paperwork, they'll cross out the 7% and change it to 6% before they even go out and meet with the person. So before they've even tried or asked a question about it. So So I would, when you ask what sets us apart, I would say part of what sets us apart is we have a lot of agents who actually go out and do 7. In fact, a little side note to that. So when I first started, I had no idea that that's what companies did. So this is 20 years ago. My first listing, which I think I remember, I talked recently about going door knocking. Was that here on Tuesday about door knocking in my first street I went on?
Yeah.
Oh.
Dave?
Yeah, with the guy with Dave
You
Burke.
picked the lucky side of the street.
Yeah, not Dave Baird, but Dave Burke. But yeah, he would always pick the lucky side. And remember, I said, "What do I do if I get an appointment or somebody wants to meet with me?" And they said, "Oh, don't worry, they won't." Do you remember me saying that? So this first one though, that particular house, when I went out on my first listing with them, I sat down with the paperwork and I had glanced over it. I hadn't really taken the time to read it, which I would recommend for you guys. A really good thing to do is get a copy of the listing agreement. Read through it with a yellow highlighter and take notes, highlight the things you don't understand, and then we can sit down and I can talk through it. But so I sat down and I'm going through this with the guy, and we got to the commission section, which is in section 2, and I got there and I was like, and the commission's gonna be, and I looked down and saw 7, and I was like, and I just said 7%, and he was like, okay. And so I remember I came back to the office, turned it into the office. So when I'd gotten a listing, our next meeting that we had, our broker got up and said, "Russ, come up here." So I go up and stand next to him. And he's like, "I want to tell you guys, brand new agent, first listing," and he went out and got a 7% listing. And everybody's like, "Whoa," and cheering. And I was like, I didn't know we had a choice. I just thought that's what it was. So part of it is, and so I have noticed that my experience has been, even with new agents, if that they can go out and get 7% listings all the day long, but then seasoned agents will have this habit of just assuming, well, nobody will do that, so they change it to 6. So
Well, and then where's the custom of splitting that commission with the buyer's side?
great question. So as far as how do you split it,
Mhm.
it's up to you. If you want to, sometimes if I had a client that was a little hesitant on doing a 7 or an 8, I've done a lot of 8% listings as well. That if I had a client who was hesitant on it, that I would then say, I'm going to offer 3.5 to whoever brings in a buyer. Now think about it for you guys. If you're out showing properties and you're seeing on the MLS under the BAC, just so for those that aren't aware, BAC is saying how much percentage of commission you're going to get. You'll see, 2.5, 3, 3, 3 is kind of probably the norm. And then all of a sudden, if you saw one that was 3.5%, if you are showing the property, what's going through your mind if you're the buyer's agent?
That one's going on top
Focus.
of the list.
You really hope they want to buy that house, right? What if, and so here's how I will present it to a seller sometimes in terms of this. If you're going to have to offer now, like I say, there's an agent in your office. I don't know if you've met Trent Hyde yet. Have you met Trent?
No, by
So-
first name.
So ask Trent. Trent has done a ton of 8% listings. Now, and I don't fully agree with how he did this, but what Trent was doing, and I don't know if he still is, he would go and list a property at 8%, and then he would throw on here for the buyer 5%. Think about that now if you're showing properties. And you see you're gonna get paid 5% of the purchase price agents were like, wait for his
One day
properties to
on
come
market.
on. Yeah. So you think about it, what does it do for you right now sitting here if you knew, if I go out and show all these
Excited.
houses, I'm gonna get 2.5 on this one or 5% on this one. Now,
That's interesting.
here's the thing I will say. Now for me, you're never gonna be able to fully, and this may not be 100% correct, but if somebody doesn't really want this house, selling real estate is different than selling a TV or something like that. Meaning you might be able to convince somebody to buy the TV and they take it home. But a house, there's such that you got that about a 2-week due diligence time frame that they could just cancel for any reason at all and get their money back. So you convince them to buy a house they don't want, they're probably not going to follow through with it. But for me, where this comes in, the biggest play of this 3.5 or what Trent sometimes does is 5 is if you as the agent were looking at this list of properties and saying which ones am I going to show my client, even if this property is borderline, if it works for them, you're probably going to show it. Versus if this one is borderline, you're probably not going to show it, right?
Yeah.
And that's where, so for me, it's when you're asking the question, how do you split it? My preference out of the gate would be that I just keep 4 and we offer 3 to whoever brings in the buyer. However, you may want to say, we're going to offer 3.5% because that's going to get more people even excited about coming and seeing your home.
So would that kind of be like a strategy you might employ on a house that you know might be a tougher sell?
Yeah, could be. Now that is interesting you bring that up though, because for years and years and years what I saw was the times when people would do this, when they would put 3.5, is usually when the property was overpriced. Meaning that nobody was gonna, so an agent was trying to do that to convince people to come look at a home that nobody was gonna buy anyway because it was overpriced.
Okay.
So it's a little bit, I only bring that up because I think you do want to be careful that you're not doing it in, I mean, even if the property's overpriced and you throw it out there for 5%, yeah, you might get a couple showings, but you're still, if it's overpriced, the buyers are still not going to buy it. So,
Okay.
so I don't know, there's differing opinions. Like, in fact, you will hear George talk about it. He'll say it doesn't make a difference at all if it's at 3.5%. And I will say for me, that's not going to make a determination for me of like, I'm not going to try to really push somebody to go for this over this one of these houses, but I'm sure going to be making sure I show this property and hope that they want to buy it.
And not to like do my clients a disservice, but the 2.5%, it's like, do I really wanna make an effort to make this happen or include it in what I wanna show them?
Sure.
A lot of times, no.
Well, in fact,
Unless I can really say, okay, this really is like the best thing for them, that's really not likely.
yeah. So in fact, perfect with that, you know, what you learn in real estate school, right, is that you got to look out for your client's best interest, not your own. So if this house is in your client's best interest, you should show it to them. I'm all for that. So let me tell you kind of how you deal with it, because I actually had this scenario happen where I had a property show, I had a list that was like this. We didn't have any of these. But there was 4 houses, and one of them was 2.5, the other ones were all 3. We went out and looked at it. My buyer, as we were out looking at the house, really out of all these 4, they liked this one the best, the 2.5% commission. And they said, what do you think? And I said, well, I mean, it's your decision. You're the one that has to decide if you want to buy the house or not. They said, well, let us think about it. So I got a call from the agent whose listing it was, so who had put it out there for 2.5%. And he says, hey, can you give me some feedback? And I said, you know what, they actually really like the house, but let me tell you the challenge that they're going to have. What does our buyer agency agreement with the buyer, what does it say in terms of how much commission we're going to get paid?
3%.
Yeah, it says we're going to get 3%. So I told the guy, I said, the fact that you're only offering 2.5% commission might be an issue though. And he said, why? And I said, well, because they don't have the cash to bring in the other 0.5% to pay me. And he said, well, you realize that, you know, you have to look out for your client's best interest, not your own. And I said, I am. I showed them the property. It's not like I hid it from them and didn't show it to them. I showed them the property. But you got to keep in mind, this is what I told him, you got to keep in mind, I have an agreement with them that says that I'm going to get paid 3%. So if you only pay 2.5%, they've got to pay the other 0.5%. So I don't know what's going to happen with it. And he hung up. So he didn't say anything. But here is where the difference came into play. So here's where things, it's not like I wasn't trying, it wasn't like I hid this property from him. I showed him, I gave him every opportunity. I never once told my client anything about this. And truth is, had they decided they wanted to buy that house, I would have let them buy it. Now, I would have gone to the agent and said, there's a couple of ways I would have tried to approach it. Either gone to the agent and said, we need an agreement that you're going to pay me 3%. Or what I could have done as well is charge my buyer the 0.5%, but ask the seller to pay, instead of 3% in closing costs, ask them to pay 3.5% in closing costs. And then they're just going to, and you want to make sure you word that to say to be paid at the buyer's discretion or allocated at the buyer's discretion. Meaning the buyer gets to decide where that money goes, and then they could actually just say the other 0.5% is going to go towards what they're going to be paying me. So there's ways that you can kind of tiptoe around it. But here's the key is they had a little bit of interest in it, and could have I followed up and said, hey, do you want to write an offer on that house? Yes, but I didn't, because I was hoping they didn't want to buy it. Now, so I hope you kind of get where I'm going with it. It's not like I'm going to persuade them not to do it. I feel like I was following all of my fiduciary duties. I just wasn't pushing them on, you wanna go, now versus if it had been the other way around like this, and they had said, let us think about it, I would have the next morning been calling and saying, so what do you think? You wanna write an offer on that house? So, I don't know if that's kind of a long way of
No,
answering
that's
your question,
Great.
but
That was so great.
but for me, that's really where I think the advantage of this comes into play is it gonna make a difference? No. Is an overpriced house gonna sell because of 5% or 3.5%? No. But
Mhm.
it is gonna get that agent to do that one little extra question about, you wanna write an offer, do you wanna go take a second look at that house? They're gonna be more likely, I would say, to say positive things about the listing versus up here, they're gonna be more likely to say, yeah, I don't know, let me check on the neighborhood, I'm not sure about, or whatever, who knows, they may say something, so that's the advantage, I think, of doing like a 7% versus a 6, so.
Do you think that it really attributes to our larger numbers in this company, as far as having that room to entice buyers agents?
No, I don't think so. I think it's more of the training and stuff that we do, it's just our skill sets, I think, is probably where I would say more so than anything.
But what you did say, because I know I'm just coming from that consumer mindset, because I wasn't really aware that this was how it worked. I'm sure I'm gonna encounter people saying, well, why so much? But you're saying it's kind of a standard amongst the larger companies, that 7%?
Well, the paperwork, so when I say
So
this, yeah,
it's out there that that's kind of, what should be the norm, I guess, but it's not, because people are too afraid to ask for it.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly how I would present it, is that most name brand companies are gonna have their contract saying 7,
Mhm.
but they either have a 6% as well, or agents are crossing out the 7 and changing it to 6 before they even talk about it,
Okay,
before they even ask.
thank you.
Russ, when I was with King Garf, let's just say my average is 15 cars a month or something like that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't worry so much about getting too caught up in this, and the reason is I always knew if I had 15, we'll say 9 are gonna be what they call a mini.
Mhm.
And then the other 6 you might make some money on, but your averages work out, so the important part is just to do as much activity and then know your numbers.
So let me tell you what I just got out of what you said. The next time I go buy a car, I wanna tell them, make me a mini.
Sure.
I wanna be a mini that you're making very little money on, right?
Here's
I'm
the
just
thing. Here's the thing, though, and I would assume real estate's the same as, there's so much information out there that if someone's allowed you to make money on them nowadays, it's because you didn't do your homework. I mean, the internet is really works
Yeah, sure.
to the consumer's advantage.
Sure. So, yeah, good. So what other questions?
One last question,
Sure.
still along the same lines.
Okay.
The goal is appointments. When I finally get to that first appointment, the Mike Ferry concept is the pre-listing package that you drop off to them. Do we have that anywhere, or?
We don't have a set package
Okay.
per se. I mean, well, I take that back. You can, if you, at the front desk, you should be able to ask, what,
Senator
yeah, but I can't remember.
April, she's named.
April, I was gonna say, it used to be Adrian, but now April. So yeah, you could talk to April, and I think they charge $5 or something for it. If they do have something like that you could use.
Already paper copies wise?
But you could kind of create your own, really, is what I would say, and what you would want to do is just put some information, some testimonials maybe about yourself, the paperwork, some information about Century 21, but it doesn't matter so much what that is. The idea behind that would be it gives them a chance to review those things to keep your appointment being shorter than having to go through it all while you're there.
And then when we do get to the actual appointment, what should we be studying to be prepared for that?
I'm surprised from Centerville that you're asking that question, honestly. But the only reason I say that, no, the only reason I say that is because John is so good at hammering the listing
He
presentation.
hasn't been there, and I've
Well,
been
okay,
there
then
a few
that's why.
weeks.
Okay.
It's just gonna.
No,
so-
I know, I'm just teasing, but, and it's recorded, so hopefully John doesn't see it, but.
Yeah, in fact, John, Katie brought up, objections during the listing
Yeah.
presentation during this morning's
Good.
assent.
Yeah, so,
it
but we
was.
will cover too in the presentations class, which I don't remember what day that is coming up, but we'll go through all that. But think of it this way, ultimately, what your presentation, the way you get a 7% listing is you gotta create the value.
Mhm.
And show that the value, and the way to do that, the way you create the value is through asking questions. And one of the things you'll hear John say, which is why I bring this up, because I've heard John say it more than anybody else, would you rather take an open book test or a closed book test?
Oh, Johnson.
open, right? You'd rather have an open book test. So how do you do that? You ask them enough questions to find out what are the benefits, what are the things they're looking for, and then you show them how what we're going to do is going to meet those benefits. And at that point, that's where. So really, I get asked a lot of times by agents, I need some good stuff to take out or a good listing presentation, a PowerPoint or something to use. To me, the very best listing presentation is that you sit down and say, tell me about what's important to you about getting your home sold, and digging and finding out more and more and more. And if you'll do that, you don't need all the stuff.
The
stuff
presentation makes it sell.
that's right.
That's what I wanted to hear. I
Perfect.
wasn't sure if there was some some
There is.
skeleton to follow.
And you could, if you go on to 21 Online, there is a PowerPoint that you could use. But in fact, there's a broker that I used to work with, and that he had like a binder printout that he would bring, and he would show every page and talk about everything. And he would demonstrated that in our managers meeting one day, and it took him like an hour and a half to go through it. And we were all sitting there going, if you came to my house and did that, I would list with you just so you'd shut up.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just like, So anyway, so yeah, ultimately, and we'll work on the presentation, which in fact, in your book, let me just point it out for you so that you've got it. I think it's on page 75 in your script book.
Okay.
Has the Century 21 Century 21 listing presentation, which this gives you kind of a skeleton outline of the process you want to go through. And what I'll tell you is that is, in my opinion, if you did that, you will set yourself apart from everybody else out there.
Does it get, sorry, can I just ask one more question? Does it get detailed about like what we do for marketing? Because I know like he just kind of gave the keyword internet, like where will you expose me, compared with, because I'm going to be dealing with FSBOs right now.
In there, not so much. But here's what I'll tell you. Actually, my experience of going out and doing this type of a presentation, it is very, very rare that they care about the marketing.
Okay.
It boils down to something to do with their family, their money, getting to wherever they need to go, and with it. It's having the confidence in you that you know what you're doing and you can take care of the deal for them, and that it's not gonna hurt them, basically.
They don't bother
They wanna
with
feel
details
safe.
too much.
Yep. That's been my experience. Is very, very rare are they gonna say, well, which websites are you putting it on and stuff. So if you don't do that, that is when they start to ask those type of questions. That's what I found.
I think like from being here, I learned this, that like my favorite question to ask is, what do you expect me to do when we list your home? What are your expectations of me? And all of a sudden, if they don't mention, put it on websites and this and that, I'm not gonna bother talking about that. But if they expect me to do this and that, which maybe I wasn't even thinking of or aware of,
Exactly.
perfect, I'll do that.
Yep.
Like I'll do whatever you need me to do, so.
Yeah, I always think about it as like, and maybe this isn't a good analogy, but this is how it works in my brain. It's like, if I needed an attorney and I go to the attorney, I'm not gonna be like, all right, what are you gonna do? Tell me, I wanna know everything you're gonna do to get me out of this or whatever. Instead, it's more like, are there good recommendations from the person? Do they, do I trust that, do I feel like they're gonna be the right person to take care of me, if that makes sense?
Sure.
So,
Okay.
What page is that?
75. All right, so sorry, Paul.
It's all right.
I meant to get to you a little sooner. So we've got Paul here from Citywide, which, do you have any specific questions, anything for? So any specific mortgage-related questions you want to deal with before we jump into what we're talking about today? Anything you need help with mortgage-wise?
How long are your pre-approvals good for?
For 60 days.
Yeah, 60 days. Okay, that's what I thought.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Which
so-
means what? So after the 60 days, what's got to happen?
Gotta close.
Or
Gotta
you're gonna probably have to repull credit, is that, yeah, so ultimately that's what that means, so, okay?
I like the close idea.
Yeah, close is much better,
Close.
Yeah.
close is much better.
Yeah, whatever way we can help you facilitate it and get the process through and so forth. Just my name is the same as his. It's Jolly. That's right. We're tied to Christmas, so we're always trying to be jolly most of the time.
A lot of pressure.
And
Yeah.
you may or may not know about Mr. Jolly. He comes from finance background. He is very, very smart. He knows numbers. So
Wow. I'm here to help.
yeah.
So that's great. Yeah, and I anyway any way we can help. We find in many instances people are trying to, use their largest single asset that they'll ever have in their lifetime to get out of financial issues, and we can help in that regard. But that usually is after they own the home. So we want to help them get the home so they can increase their net worth and build, and then get them to a point where they can lead a more comfortable life. So we believe it or not, you can get into huge financial planning things with them. It is in fact their single largest asset. So let me know how we can help. Again, appreciate the opportunity to sit in with you, and with that, I'll. I do.
Hey, so yeah, Paul's just gonna plan on being here since Pete decided to become one of us instead of being a loan officer.
Pete's awesome too.
I just melted in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he came to all the trainings and was like, I want to do this. What am I doing? So anyway, because of that, so Paul's gonna be here to help and support us in terms of mortgage and things like that. So anyway, as you have questions and things like that, please ask around that, because we want to make sure that we're getting you taken care of in all aspects of the business and things. So anyway, thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
All right, so let's go. Today, what we're going to be getting into and talking about is the name of the class is activities management, but really that's a sly way for me to say time management, and I'm always a little nervous when I'm going to talk about time management that. You guys, nobody's going to show up, and you can see our numbers are even a little bit lighter, even still. But we're going to do it today from a little different. Are you excited?
Yeah.
So we're going to do it from a little different perspective than anything else you've probably seen before in terms of time management. So what I've got actually here, let me just get it pulled up here, is I'm going to show you some stuff that's related to kind of some of the history, basically, even of where time management got started.
That's one more time.
We're watching movies.
We're what? We're watching a movie?
We're not taking notes right now.
No. All right. Let me just make sure we got this on here.
Yeah.
Or maybe I went and looked at the car there.
All right, so we're going to start here by talking about this guy by the name of C. Northcott Parkinson. So Parkinson, we're going to talk about two of Parkinson's laws. So the first one is this law of expansion. Let me kind of give you the background on C. Northcott Parkinson. He was working on his PhD thesis. This is back in about 1930. Okay, he was working on his PhD thesis in England, and he was doing a study of the naval shipyard in the port of Southampton. So he's studying this shipyard, and as he's doing this PhD thesis, working on it, he came up with this law of expansion. So we're going to talk about two of the laws that he came up with, is the law of expansion and then the law of triviality. But we're going to start here with the first, as this law of expansion. Here's what it says. Work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion. So when you read that, stop and think about it for a second. When you read that, work expands so as to fill the time available for its completion, what comes to mind? What thoughts do you have about it?
Government employees standing around the shoulders.
Okay, government employees. Okay, good. You're going to see that even more in a second.
Weeds.
Weeds. Say more about weeds. What do you mean?
So it will grow anywhere and everywhere that has the space to do it.
Perfect. Yeah, love that example. Yeah. So yeah, weeds will expand so as to fill the space available for them, right? Same thing. Go ahead, Brett. It's Brett, right?
Yeah, Brett. My girlfriend getting ready in the morning. If I give her an hour and a half, it's gonna be
Perfect. Yeah, great. Another good example. Yeah. So that's what he found, is that work expands. So let me show you what that looks like. So here, this is what he found in his study. So this is the naval shipyard. So he's studying the Royal Navy. The number of ships that were in commission in 1914 was 62. In 1928, it had dropped to, they had 20 now ships that were in commission. The officers and men in the Royal Navy went from 146,000 down to 100,000, so it dropped 31%. This had dropped 67%. But then notice the dockyard workers had gone up 9%. The dockyard officials and clerks had gone up 40%, and then the main guys in the Royal Navy, look at what happened here. Gone from 2,000 to 3,569. So ships have gone down 67%. The bureaucracy has gone up 128%. So as he was studying this is where he came up with this, work expands to fill the time available, meaning that you'll find busy work. So in terms of you and in terms of real estate, how does that relate to you?
Cut your time so you're more focused, like on tasks.
Well, not what we should do, but what do we do?
Oh,
That's what I mean. It's how. What do we, as agents or people, do that is similar to this?
I'll
Go
give
ahead.
you an example of myself that's a bad example. So yesterday I had it planned, I was going to get Red X in the morning, I was going to start prospecting by the afternoon. Well-meaning, well-intended agents stopped and talked to me, and I just let them talk and
Yeah.
talk and talk. And then after I was grateful for it because it was all excellent information.
Yeah.
However, that's not going to make me money today,
Exactly.
And Mike Ferry, I've just kind of been listening to that concept of the people that utilize the system to a T. You're a well-oiled machine. You
Yep.
know what I mean? I
Yep.
mean, it's just turn it out, and don't stop and don't change. You've got deals going, that's okay. You still have to do prospecting. That's a part of the job.
Exactly.
That doesn't stop just because you have this going on. Maybe now you need to get an assistant.
Yep.
And expanding your horizons rather than feeling limited, like, oh no, now I don't have time. And then all of a sudden the well-oiled machine starts to fall apart.
Perfect. Yeah. So what happens with us is ultimately if you decide I'm going to go to work for 8 hours today, you would show up, or let's say 10 hours or 12, doesn't matter, but if you said I'm going to work 10 hours today, you will show up and be there for 10 hours. But that doesn't mean this work will expand to fill 10 hours. So that's what he found, is work expands to fill the time available for its completion. What you see here happens in every business if it's not very closely managed. Meaning even in terms of companies that are running, the management, the leadership, will become top-heavy because we need somebody to do this. We ought to hire somebody to go do that or whatever. Even though, why would you need? This is our government. Thank you. That's exactly right. This is our government. Why would you need 128% more when you got 67% less chips? You don't. But work expands to fill the time available. Okay, so that's the first piece. So that's the first piece I want you to keep in mind. So the next piece, this is his second law that he came up with, which is the law of triviality. So here's what he found in terms of the law of triviality. Time spent on any item of the agenda will be in inverse proportion to its importance. So as he studied the Royal Navy, he came up with time spent on any item on an agenda. If you pay attention to what generally happens in any meeting you ever go to, but you do the same thing in terms of how you work your day as well. The time you spend on any one thing will be in inverse proportion to its importance. So what does that mean?
Sounds like you're talking less about the more important stuff.
Yeah.
More about the less important stuff.
That's right. We'll spend a ton of time on things that are not important, and we spend very little time on the things that are very, very important. Let me show you what that looks like. So basically, it's if you take so we're going to a second person, but a third principle now. So far we've been talking about C. Northcott Parkinson. The third principle is the Pareto principle. Pareto principle you've all heard the 80-20 rule, right? Everybody knows the 80-20. That was discovered by this guy. He was an Italian economist. His name was Vilfredo Pareto, and he was an Italian economist. And what he came up with, as he was studying factories, is he found is 80% of the production came out of 20% of the factories. So this is what this looks like. Is 80% of your time is going to be spent on activities that make a 20% impact to your business. So if these were, notice my S dropped down or something. So, but what he found is if these two items were the most important items in your business, and then these other 8 were less important, but this red line is how much time we spend on it. So we spend very little time on these 2 things that are very important, and we spend a ton of time on these items that are not so important. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
I wonder why we do the naturally. It's because they're therefore problematic, and we try to solve problems?
Nope, I'm gonna, good segue here. Let me actually, I should have done, yeah, this chart looks a little better. So that's what it looks like. These are the most important, but this is how much time we spend on them versus here's how much time we spend on these leases. So I'll tell you, here's where it comes from, right here. So the next thing I'm gonna share with you. This is a study of the Boston School District, okay? So the Wall Street Journal had done this study, and I won't tell you the name of the study right now because it'll give away part of where I'm going with it. But what they were doing was studying these principles of, the law of triviality and this 80-20 rule. What they did was they went to a meeting that the Boston School District was having. In this meeting, they were going to be discussing two items. The first item on their agenda, which they talked about not first, so it was a $1.5 million annex. Okay. The second item on their agenda was a $200,000 item. So they had two things that the school district were going to be talking about. The first one was $200,000, and the second was $1.5 million. Now, the difference between, so on this $1.5 million, the difference between the high bid and the low bid was $200,000. So they were going to build this building for $1.5 million. They had two bids. One was $200,000 less. The other was $200,000 more. They ended up taking the high bid. So they chose the high bid. They spent I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me give you the next one. The second item that they talked about, this $200,000 item, was a difference of $10,000. So this was a 1-hour meeting, okay? They spent 57.5 minutes talking about this item, and they saved $10,000. They spent 7.5 minutes, the meeting went over, so they spent 57.5 here, 7.5 here, and they took the high bid here. Now, this is very crucial. If you understand this, it'll give you a huge insight into your own business and how and why you do the things you do. But stop and think about that for a minute. Why would they spend 57.5 minutes talking about this and choose the low bid, 7.5 minutes on this $1.5 million and take the high bid and spend an extra $200,000? Any thoughts?
Because it's not their money.
Quality.
Okay.
The percentages are, the percentage is not as impactful.
Okay.
Well, I would just argue that the $1.5 million thing, that's more well defined and everybody was more on the same page than the $200,000 deal. And then if you're spending that kind of money, people genuinely feel better if they spend more because they understand the value of it. That's
Good. Yeah, you're on the right track. Before I give you the answer, what do you think they were talking about here for $200,000? Well, actually, okay, go ahead. What do you think they were talking about for $200,000 in a Boston school district? Think about schools. What would you be talking about in the school district that's going to cost $200,000 in it for the year?
New curriculum.
Computers.
Less important than computers. Less important than
Paper.
You're close. You're close. You're on the right track with that. That's simple. They spent 57.5 minutes and saved $10,000 talking about
Toilet paper.
toilet paper.
That is, hey, I said paper.
I know, that's right, you were close. So stop and think about that for a minute. Why would you spend 57.5 minutes talking about toilet paper and 7.5 minutes talking about the building of this building?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Well, but it answers the question you brought up, Pete. How many, I'm going to show you what the answer is. How many of you within the last year, at some point, either you or somebody you live with, purchased toilet paper in the last year? Yeah. I was going to say I'm nervous about the ones who didn't raise their hand. So let me ask you this then. So all of us have bought toilet paper in the last year, right? Or somebody in our household has. How many of you spent $1.5 million in the last year of your own money? See, that's the answer. The reason we spend so much time on the things that are not important, because we're familiar. All of us are familiar with toilet paper. We could argue reasonably about how soft it should be or whatever, how scratchy or thin or 2-ply. We could all argue about that. But how many of us know all about building codes and the earthquake codes that would have to be in place? So what happens is they can argue effectively to save the money here, but what Chad said is we trust, and we feel like if we're spending the extra $200,000, we're probably getting a better building by doing it that way because we don't know enough about building a building to do that. So ultimately, let me simplify that even just a little more. Ultimately, what really happens is we're familiar with this, we're unfamiliar with the building. That's the difference. The things that we're familiar with, when we're comfortable, your brain wants to be comfortable. It doesn't like to be uncomfortable. And so we spend the time doing that. So for you, in terms of your business, what are the things that, think about real estate for a minute now. What are the things that you're most familiar with? Facebook,
Yeah.
good. What else? What else are we familiar with?
Conversating.
So in fact, I'm going to make a list of some of these things here. So familiar. Okay, so you said Facebook. What else? You said visiting, which Anita brought that up too earlier about an agent coming and stopping and just chit-chatting with you at the office, right? Good. What else? What are other things related to real estate that we're familiar with? John?
Running comps and doing searches.
Okay, I'm going to just say, yeah, I was going to say CMA, but I'll just say MLS, CMA. What else? What else goes on in your day that are things that you're familiar with? Okay, that's why I threw the computer on there. It's kind of an old one. Yeah, emails. Check my emails. What else?
Family stuff.
Okay. Good. What else?
Lunch.
Yeah, that's my favorite part of the day right there. That's how I met Chad, by the way. Was at lunch, and he convinced Rick to buy a cheesecake, and Rick didn't want to buy cheesecake, so Rick said, "You need to be a realtor." So,
Phone calls out there?
what's that?
Phone call?
Well, what kind of phone calls?
Any, anywhere from prospecting, which is the 20%.
Well, so I guess that's what I'm trying to land on. Is you're saying is making phone calls familiar to you?
Maybe it should be on a scale. It goes down and the bottom is.
Well, no, we're going to do a separate one here in a second. But notice that. I mean, this is probably sufficient. But notice this. All of these things are things that we're familiar with. We're comfortable. It's easy, right? Okay? So now, what about the things that you're least familiar with? Because see, like building the buildings, what are the things that we are least familiar with? Okay?
Or uncomfortable and unfamiliar.
Yeah.
The electrical.
What do you mean by electrical?
Cold.
You said building the building?
No. In terms of your business.
Oh, yeah.
Like the building. I know I'm like electrical.
I thought you were selling a building.
No. What are in terms of real estate, what are the things that you're unfamiliar with? Okay?
Contracts.
Okay, good.
Negotiating.
Contracts, negotiating.
Prospecting. Lead generation. Appointment setting. And negotiating.
Okay? Prospect, negotiate. What else? Somebody get the lights.
Asking for.
Asking for referral.
Okay? Yeah, I'm going to
I
throw
caught
in.
myself calling people all day, not asking for appointments, and I'm just like, what am I doing?
Yeah, why? Yeah, honestly, that's just it. You have to ask yourself, why would I do that? Why would I make calls all day long?
I think that's an interesting tie between the two lists of something being familiar, like even after we've talked to so many people, cold calling or whatever, you become a little more familiar with it, but you still might be unfamiliar with closing and
Yes.
setting appointments, and so one is starting to rob the other.
That's exactly right. Yes, perfect. So good. What else? I can think of at least one other one that you haven't hit on in here yet that's unfamiliar,
That's why.
that's scary to you. Okay, but I would throw SOI. I'm not sure. But there's at least one more. If you can't get it, then I'll throw it down for you. But it's probably, well, it's not so difficult. But what about when you get the appointment?
Close.
No, after you close.
Making the list.
Yeah,
Oh.
it's actually going out and making the presentation, right? I mean, is it safe to say those are the things that you are probably most unfamiliar with in terms of real estate?
They're the money generators.
Yeah. Well, and so that's the point. Going back to the Pareto principle, we will spend, see, here's the challenge. We'll spend 80% of our time doing these things and 20% of our time doing these things, Yet, these are the things that actually contribute and make you money, right? I mean, stop and think about that for a minute in terms of if what you did, in fact, there's another one over here we left off that we'd like to do. Classes, here, being here right now. It's familiar, it's easy to come to class, but and we convince ourselves, well, I need to do that because I need to learn all of the stuff, I need to learn how to present, which is true. So keep in mind, as we go through this, as we're going to talk about some of these things, in terms of some of these familiar things, as we go through this today, keep in mind that these things are not necessarily bad. I mean, meaning like coming to class is not a bad thing. You need to do that, right? And it's important. The challenge is, this is where work expands to fill the time available. Meaning, when we have time, we'll go out looking for classes to go and attend just so that we can feel good that I worked for 10 hours and felt like I was productive, even though I wasn't. So here's what I want to talk about now is switching this to more in terms of productivity and not necessarily as important or unimportant. Because as we go through and talk about some of this stuff, what I don't want you doing is thinking that I'm saying that like going to class is not important. Showing up to Morning Ascent and the summits and those type of things. Those are important. I just want you to keep in mind what we need to do is take control of our schedule so that we are actually in charge of it rather than the work expanding to fill the time available and doing the law of triviality, which is that we're going to spend the most amount of our time on the least important things and the least amount of our time on our most important things, when in reality, what really is your job as an agent?
Get business.
I mean, let's talk about it. So,
Close the transaction.
what is your job as an agent? So say the stuff you guys said again. Okay, good. Prospect.
Presentation. Or appointments.
Lead follow-up.
Okay, so I'm going to throw appointments in with prospecting, but I would agree. And then somebody said presentation. What else? Close. Okay. Now we're going to get out a little bit out of order, and that's fine. But okay, close. What else?
Negotiate.
Good. What else?
Sell the home.
So I'm going to do that as part of close.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's well.
I was
Well,
thinking
let's do-
closing the contract, but selling the home is
Yeah.
selling the home. That's what I was.
Because that's how I feel
Okay.
about when I
Well,
see
so I'll throw it under
process.
negotiating then, meaning we got to negotiate, but both with the client and then in terms of on behalf of the client to get the deal closed. So I would agree. I'm just going to throw it. I'll just call it that. What else?
Marketing.
I'm going to say the other one. I'm going to say, which really these are the things that are your job is price reductions, getting price reductions. Prospect, present, close, negotiate, price reductions on listings and close. Really, this is what you should be doing, and every day this is what should be happening in your schedule. Now, these are important pieces, some of them, as to how you get this to take place, right? But not. Let me say it different. What would happen to your business, your real estate business, if you spent 80% of your time doing these things and 20% of your time doing these things? It would blow up. Yeah. I mean, seriously, can you see what would happen in terms of your, I mean, even Anita brought up, how long you had your license now?
About 3 weeks.
About 3 weeks. And I'm not picking on you by any means, but she made her first phone calls last night, which congratulations, right?
First, stranger phone calls. I've been doing my
SOI. Okay,
yeah.
good. I'm glad. Okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that. But notice that what would happen though if after and again I know this isn't 100% reality, but what would happen if you spent in fact let's say it this way, the next 3 weeks doing 80% of your time doing these things. Now here's the key to this. So how do we do price reductions if we don't have any listings?
Can't.
Okay, so if you don't have a listing, you don't have to worry about that one right now. What about negotiating?
Can't.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about that. What about presenting if you don't have any appointments? Okay. Closing, I guess depending on
What I meant
if
by
we tie
close
that.
is sign the contract.
Sure, okay.
Have them sign the contract.
Okay, so if we don't have any appointments, then we can't do that. But we always can do this. So if you don't have anything else going on in your business, this is what we need to be doing, right?
She's excited.
So if we should be doing 80% of our time spent doing that, okay? Any questions so far where we're at? Are you depressed or excited about all this?
Something, just because you put it up on the board and I hadn't thought of this, but this is kind of a little off topic with the schedule stuff, but with price reductions, how do you handle those with, if I've got a client, we go in and they're very tight financially, they don't have a lot of equity, they either haven't been there a long time or they bought it too high or whatever it is. And as far as price reduction go, how, I'm working with a client right now that basically says if we can't sell it for this price, we maybe come down a couple thousand, if that, but if we can't sell it, then we'll just rent it.
Okay.
So it basically kills my deal if I price reduce that, right? It kills the listing. So just because they've kind of put themselves in this situation, there's nothing really I can do about it other than be aggressive right from the get-go. That's basically my only option, right?
Mm-hmm.
At that point.
And here's what I would say. When you're in that type of a scenario, here's the decision you've got to make. Is I would say you put it out there. If within 3 weeks you're not receiving offers and you're not, well, how long has it been listed? Let's do it that way.
I've got the agreement, but they have to move next week, and then it's going to be vacant.
Okay, so it hasn't hit the MLS yet.
Right, I've got the contract,
Okay,
but
good.
we're waiting.
So here's what I would do then. So when you put it on, if I would say give it 3 weeks. At the end of 3 weeks, one of three things is going to happen. Either you're going to have gotten an offer and it's under contract, you're going to have had some showings but no offers, or you're going to have had no showings, no phone calls, nothing. Okay. So ultimately, if you get it sold, great. That we don't even need to talk about that, right?
Yeah.
But the other two, if you're getting no showings, no phone calls, nothing like that, then at that point, probably your best bet is to just tell them go rent it and give it back. Just get rid of it. 'Cause here's the thing: we talk a lot about listings, and we want listings. And long term, you want to be probably a listing agent because you have more control of your time that way. But what a listing, so taking Curtis's sign here and planting it in somebody's front yard on a home that isn't going to sell is a liability. It's not an asset. So we talk a lot about listings, we want listings, but we want listings that are going to sell. So having one where your sign sits out in front of the house for a long time when nothing happened and nothing happened and nothing happened, what would happen if you were the seller?
Frustrated.
You get frustrated. What do the neighbors start to say?
He sucks as an agent.
Yeah, I don't want my name being said that. I don't want people saying I suck as an agent. So for me, I would say, now, I'm going to tell you something a little different in a second, but for me, if that's happening, you're getting no phone calls, nothing, it's just sitting there and it's clear that it's not going to sell, give it back. Just say, you know what, let's take it off the market, go rent it, and let's save us all some heartache.
Mm-hmm.
The other option though, let's say you are getting some showings, you are maybe getting some calls of buyers calling off of it. In that scenario, you may want to say, let's keep trying it for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
And in which case I would be honest with the seller of saying it looks like because we're getting showings but no offers, we're probably 5 to 7% overpriced. But if you can't come down that much, now here's the other thing: is don't just assume because they said that at the beginning that that's what's going to happen. Meaning, because I've seen a lot of times where I've gone in and people have said this is the very bottom, we won't do anything less than that. You put it on the market, and then when you go back later and say, look, based on what the market's telling us, we're probably 5 to 7% overpriced, so if we came down 5%, it's amazing how sometimes they go from that to, you know what, I'm going to go borrow some money from mom and dad or whatever, we'll bring in that extra $5,000 or whatever to get the deal done. So don't just assume that it's not. But for me, I would let them know, hey, I'm willing to keep it on here and keep trying, and I would tell them, to be honest, that part of why I'm willing to is because I'm generating other leads off of it, and it's working great for me that way. I mean, so that's the decision you just have to make: is it worth keeping it there because you're generating other leads? I just want to make sure the seller isn't frustrated and mad at me thinking it's something I'm doing wrong, because we're going to do our part of it. We're going to get the exposure. It's just if it's overpriced, there's nothing we can do about it. So
All right, yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. So ultimately, as we look at these things, what do all of these things have in common? And I'm trying to think. I might pull out I'm gonna pull this one out. Let me see, hang on.
Communication.
I'm gonna create a little bit of a different, I'm gonna do it a little different here. So I'm gonna just say presentation here, sign contracts, instead of close, I'm gonna call it sign contracts, price reductions. And negotiate. What do these all have in common?
Opportunities.
Say more about what do you mean by that?
Just because maybe you don't sign a contract on one thing, maybe it'll lead to another thing. That's an opportunity. There's just ways to, you can find positive things. Either way, any of those items go. If they go for you, you can find positives. If they go against you, you can find positives in that too as well.
Okay, good. What else? What other
See.
things do you notice they have in common?
Kind of your relationship with your clients.
Okay, say more about that. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, obviously, as you know, as you mentioned, the better relationship you have, you know, the more they're going to believe you as far as, okay, you need a price reduction, or you know, they're not going to fight you on it. You know, the presentation, obviously, if they feel comfortable with you, as opposed to somebody just coming to with dollar signs in their eyes, and they're gonna, you know, they're gonna open up more, they're gonna feel more comfortable with you being their agent, you know, stuff to that effect.
Okay.
Negotiation, they're trusting you as opposed to, you know, being suspicious about you.
Okay, good.
I think all of those.
Think
have,
you guys are right on. Everything you've said so far. Think a little simpler. Go ahead.
I think they all have action involved, doing something.
Okay, good. So here's where I was going with it, which everything you guys have said is good. It's not wrong. What?
It's all a listing.
Well, it's all, well, presentation could be presenting to a buyer, could be negotiating on behalf of a buyer, signing contracts on behalf of a buyer. So I think you could throw both. The only one, price reduction, wouldn't relate to that. But every one of these things, what they have in common is you're face-to-face. You are going to be face-to-face with a client in these scenarios, or someone who is becoming a client. Remember we talked, was it last week we talked about what makes somebody a client? So these things are all something that either you're face-to-face with somebody who is a client or who is becoming a client. So here's the way that I like to look at these is I'm going to call these appointments. Basically, you're on an appointment on these. But you're face-to-face, and really ultimately I would say with these things, these are the things that are the most productive. These are really the most productive things. So if you think about it in terms of productivity of what you could be doing, imagine this. What if, and the reason I'm going to pull prospecting out, I'm going to throw it over here into this column over here. What if what you did, now since we've been talking about the Pareto principle, the 80-20, what if 80% of your time was spent doing this? Meaning you were, and now don't get that I'm like saying don't prospect, because that's not what I'm saying. But in terms of your, what if you had enough clients and things going on that you weren't having to prospect, 80% of your time was spent just presenting, signing contracts. I mean, how much money would you make then? Huge, right? I mean, look at, what if all day long all you did is go to closings? You just showed up and went to a closing all day long for 8 hours a day or whatever.
Perfect.
You'd make a ton of money, right? So that's kind of what we want to work this towards, is you just show up at the closing table every day and you're just collecting checks, right? But unfortunately, I have yet to see somebody be able to get that far down the road. But that's kind of where we would be the ideal. But all of these things are face-to-face. Now, so think of these things as being productive. These are the most productive things you can do with your time. Prospecting, I'm going to put that under the category of indirectly productive. So, meaning these are the productive things, but this is indirectly productive, meaning we don't have this without doing this, right? Which ultimately, if you don't want your business to do this, which a lot of real estate agents do, their business looks like that. Here's what happens, is we start to prospect. So we prospect. What happens if you prospect? What should happen from prospecting?
Clients.
Yeah, you should generate appointments, right? So if I'm prospecting and I generate appointments, so I generate these appointments by prospecting, what happens once you go out and do a bunch of presentations?
hopefully get signed contracts.
Yeah, hopefully we end up signing contracts, right? And signing contracts leads to then hopefully us ending up negotiating on something to which then we end up closing on it, right? So what happens is it looks something like this. We prospect, we get appointments, we prospect, get appointments, we prospect, we're getting appointments, and then right here is the closing. Do you know what we call this moment right here? To keep it politically correct. This is the oh crap moment.
Yeah.
When you realize what?
You
I don't have anything else in the pipeline.
Yep.
And unfortunately, then you get to ride out the rest of this curve because then you start prospecting again, you prospect, then you finally get an appointment, you prospect, you get some appointments. See, and if you want to avoid that, playing this game of this roller coaster ride, the way you do that is this indirectly productive. So as I'm talking about this being your productive time, keep in mind this roller coaster thing is what will happen if you don't keep prospecting. So here's the thing, and I'm going to ask you guys to participate in an activity here at the end of our class today for the next week that I want you to keep track of, and then we'll see if you can relate to what I'm talking about. But if you were to look at just agents in general, take some seasoned, productive agents. Now, not necessarily the top producers, but just productive agents who are making a decent living in real estate. Here's what I would tell you. If you were to actually follow them around and keep track of their time, what you would find is they spend about 7 to 11% of their time doing these type of things. So using that Pareto principle of the 80-20, typically what you will find, though, is most productive agents, so keep in mind, these are agents who are making a good, decent living in real estate. If you really tracked their time and how much time they spend doing this, they're spending between 7 and 11% productive. So for you guys, I would guess that what we would find, and I'm going to have you guys do this, but is if you kept track of your time, and I do highly recommend it. In fact, Anita brought up, talking about Mike Ferry, talking about how you use your time and things. You'll hear George tell a story occasionally about that he used to have 2 stopwatches. And if somebody came up and talked to them, so if Dan came up and talked to me, I would stop the one and start the other one. And if Dan said, "What are you doing?" I would say, "Oh, I'm just keeping track of how much time I'm not making money. So go ahead, what did you need?" So that's what he said he would do to kind of get the message across to people of, you're costing me money by stopping and talking to me about this stuff. And then they would be quick and go away and he could stop it and start the other stopwatch. Let me tell you what I did. When I learned this, all this stuff I'm teaching with you guys, the guy that taught it to me, what he asked me to do is he said, I want you to, for the next week, and so I'm going to challenge you guys to do this same thing. For the next week, keep track of your time. Now, you don't have to do it how I'm going to tell you how I did it. You don't have to do it this detailed, although you might want to, okay? What I did is I made like a spreadsheet. So I just went on to Excel, made a spreadsheet, and I had in there 15-minute increments. So I started it at, I think I started at 8 a.m., and I went till 7 p.m., and I had 8 o'clock, 8:15, 8:30, 8:45, 9, 9:15. And here's what I did. Now, I would do it a little differently today, but back then I had a watch that was the Ironman triathlete watch, and it had a timer on there that you could set it to beep every 15 minutes. So I would set my alarm on my watch to beep every 15 minutes. And then what I did is when it would beep, I would stop and I would go to that spreadsheet that I had printed out, and I would write down, what did I do in the last 15 minutes? What was the activity I had worked on during that 15-minute period, and I wrote it down. And then I would go back and do whatever, and when it beeped, I just got in a rhythm. If it would beep, I would turn, I'd write down whatever, if I was doing a CMA or whatever it was I was doing, I would just stop and write it down. Then what you do is at the end of each day, you look at it and go, how much time during that day did I spend doing these items? And if it was 15 minutes you'd write down. If it was an hour, whatever it was, however much time you spent doing this, write it down. Now, the other thing that I did too was I kept track of the amount of time I spent prospecting that day too. So every day I was writing down what percentage of my time was spent here, what percentage of my time was spent here in prospecting as well. So doing things that would generate leads. Now, let me ask you a question just to make so that everybody's clear on it. if let's say Curtis was talking about doing some advertising on a listing and stuff, and one of the things I mentioned to him that he could do as far as advertising is you could, once you list a property, you can go on the MLS and you could share that then to Facebook. So it shows up under your timeline on Facebook, but then you can boost that. So you could pay to advertise that listing. So, and you can even decide what city you want it to go to. You could decide what income range you want people to see it, which I didn't bring that part up to you. You can say, with Facebook, you can identify all those things so that you can make sure you're target marketing people who could afford to buy it. You can even put in their behaviors of that they're likely to move. You could, all of that kind of stuff. Now let me ask you the question though. Let's say that I go set up a Facebook ad and I spend half an hour or an hour setting it up. What do I classify that as? Is it considered prospecting? Yeah, I see the head shaking. No, that's right. That would not be considered prospecting. So the other category that I would really throw some of this stuff in over here is what I would call non-productive. So really, we've got basically 3 different areas. So what I did is I kept track. So everything that I did during the day, every 15 minutes for this week, which a week doesn't tell the whole story. So doing this for just 1 week, it'll give you an idea, but it doesn't tell you the whole story. For me, an agent who, if I want to find out what's going on in their business, this is exactly what I would ask you to do. If you came to me and said, help me figure out how to make more money, what I would do is say, okay, go keep track of your time, and I would say keep track of it. I want to see every 15 minutes, keep track of your time, and I don't need to see what you're doing. I don't care about that. I just want you to be able to, at the end of each day, what percentage of the time, so let's just make it easy. If I worked 10 hours and I spent 1 hour doing these things, what percentage of my day was done with the appointment stuff? 10%, right? So I would just want to see, okay, 10% was spent here. What percentage of your day did you spend prospecting? Prospecting only counts when you are talking to people. So think of it this way. Underneath prospecting, we really have 2 areas that would fall underneath that, is active and passive, which we get into this in the lead generation class, the 2 differences. What's the difference between active and passive, though, when it comes to prospecting?
Active would be actually talking to someone. Passive would be driving around looking for people.
Yeah. So active is when you are doing it. Passive would be like an open house where I'm sitting and waiting for somebody to show up.
Advertisements.
Even doing advertisements, I would throw under non-productive. I wouldn't throw it under passive. Now, after you had mailed it out, so if you did an advertisement and you did it, once it was sent, then yeah, sitting back and waiting for the phone to ring would be passive. Yeah, I would agree with that. So under prospecting is active and passive. Now, here's the key. Like, let's say I was doing an open house. If I did an open house and I was sitting there doing passive prospecting now and nobody shows up, you don't get a count. Like, so let's say I did a 4-hour open house and not one person shows up. I would not count that as 4 hours of prospecting. I would count it as 0 hours of prospecting because nobody showed up. Does that make sense? Versus if I went out door knocking for 4 hours, I would count it as 4 hours of prospecting because I was doing it. So if you're going to do passive, so like if you're going to do an open house, my recommendation is when nobody's coming through, what should you do? Call. Yeah, get on the phone and be calling people. Call the neighbors and be telling them about the open house, something, so that you get it counted as prospecting time. Well, you couldn't go door knock if you were doing the open house. But if you had a partner, I guess you could take turns going to it now. But go ahead, Dan.
I was going to tell you that I've got a notebook in my truck, but they sell these anywhere. It breaks the day down into 15-minute segments.
Great.
And it's like good for a year.
Cool. Yeah, something like that would work. So here's what I'm telling you though. What your target should be. Now I'm saying target because I know this is easier said than done. But ultimately, your target should be to spend 80% of your time every day doing these 2 things. So if you don't have any of these, doing this. So ideally, here's what you want to look for. Your target should be 80%. Now, that's going to be very, very difficult to do. But here's what I would say is these 2 added together should for sure every single day, or at least at the end of the week, these 2 added together. So whatever this percentage is and whatever percentage here is, the 2 added together should be at least 60%. You should be and here's what I'll tell you, if you will spend at least 60% of your time in these two areas, you will be one of the very top agents in this company. Because here's what I know. Now remember, I said that good producing agents will do between 7 and 11%. The top producing, if you were to go and study the top 2% of the agents, you'll probably see that the very highest they get, even in terms of this, is going to be about 33%. So here's the point though. Now stop and think about that for a minute. Our top agent last year did over $750,000, close to $1 million in income, okay? And what I'm telling you, and I don't know for sure for him, I haven't studied him, so I'm not saying that this is for sure, but my guess is if you really kept track of his time and his day, I'll bet you he's somewhere around 33% doing this. So stop and think about that. We've got agents who are surviving, making a living in this business at 7 to 11, but to get to around $1 million a year, if you would do 33% of your time just this, not the two added together, but just this, that's how you get there. So just in case you're not making the connection, this is not linear, meaning like going from 10% here to 20% is not going to just double your business. That's my point. Is what I'm trying to get the message across is going from 10 to 20 here, it is not going to double your business because it's not linear, meaning it's a very steep curve. So going from 10 to 20 is going to 4 or 5 times your business, not just double. Does that make sense? So meaning you only have to make small improvements of this to huge impact on your business and your income. Does that make sense? But now let's get to the key of that. How do we get this to happen? By doing this. The only way you're going to get to on these appointments is you got to be prospecting, whether it's SOI, door knocking, all of these things we talked about over there. So if you will keep track of your time to figure it out, and I'm going to ask you to do it for a week, but if you'll do it for a month or maybe even longer, if you were to keep track and just make sure that you are somewhere around 60% of your time in these two areas. So again, targeting 80% your time being spent that way, which again, I know is not going to always happen, but if you have nothing going here, that means I got to spend 60% of my time prospecting, which you should be able to do. But and then over time, this will start to happen. And if it doesn't, well, let me ask you. So let's stop and talk about that real quick. Because remember I said if I were to sit down and analyze your business, what I would do is have you keep track of your time, and I could tell you exactly what the problem is. Every time. That's what I love about this is it's so easy to figure out where an agent's missing things by doing this. Chances are you'll figure it out on your own. But let me just, in case you didn't, let me take you through it. What would happen, what do you think the problem would be if somebody had very high percentage of their time? Let's say they were 10 or 11% of their time, even 20%, but let's say 7% of their time doing this, and they're not having any income. What would be the moral of that story? What would be the problem in their business? If you were doing 10% of your time doing this, and you're not closing deals.
Skill set. Mental or skill set problem.
Okay, but specifically which skill set? Or mental?
Time management.
Okay, could be.
Closing.
That's what I've found is typically what happens if people are going on a ton of presentations and they're not getting deals, it's because they're not asking for the business. Does that make sense? So that for me, here's what it always is. If this is high, if your percentage here is high and you're not closing deals, it's one of two things. It's either you're not asking for the business, you're not saying, well, should we write it up? Should we, sign the contract? Or you're lying to yourself. Meaning you're counting an appointment that really wasn't an appointment, you're tricking yourself into it. So that would be the mental part of it. Now, what about this? So what if somebody has a very high percentage here, but low here? Gabriel already told us what the problem was. What did he say his problem was when he was prospecting?
Sitting around.
Not asking for appointments.
Yeah, so if this is high and it's not translating here, every time I've studied it, the problem is the person is prospecting, but they're not saying, when can we get together?
Well, just like this morning in the set where he was doing 100 contacts, and he got 100 contacts versus his goal being appointment set. And just that mindset and confidence changes it.
And for me, this is where all this transformed for me too. I never did what he did of the 100 contacts. My goal always was every day to get 50. I was trying to get 50 contacts every day. And finally, I had somebody ask me one day and say, quit worrying about the contacts and just go till you get an appointment. Make as many contacts as it takes to get an appointment. And exactly what Jason said this morning is what happened to me. As soon as I focused on appointments instead of the contacts, I got appointments and I got them in half the time of what I was prospecting. So mine wasn't as drastic as his, from 6 to 4 appointments in an hour, but I went from doing 50 contacts a day, not getting very many appointments, to getting 1 appointment a day and generally only having to do about 25 contacts or less to do it. So,
Chris, what you were talking about before, I was sorry, I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent.
it's okay.
If you have a buyer broker agreement, 3%, and they're offering 3.5 or 5.
Oh, we're going all the way back to the beginning.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Very important.
Okay, that's fine. Go ahead.
That's it.
Well, what about
You have an agreement, 3%, but they're offering 3.5 or 5. How does that work?
Oh, okay, great. Our agreement says if what they're offering on we will get what they're offering on the MLS or 3%, whichever is greater.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
So we just get the 3.5. So good question.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I just when you said I'm gonna go back or off track, I was like,
So Jonah Gumbel, he's a good friend of mine. What's he at on that scale, would you say?
on this one?
Yeah.
And I don't know, but my guess would be he's gonna be somewhere between 10 and 20, I would guess. I mean, I don't know.
Big team,
He
he's-
could be higher, but
He's only been doing this like 5 or 6 years. He's got like 7 people on his team or something.
Yeah. My guess would be he may be higher, closer to 20 because of, and I don't know, every team operates a little differently. There are some teams that they have agents that are just generating leads for them to go on the appointment, which you can see now why they would do that, right? Why you would want to have people on your team, you would want to build a team of having people prospect so you could just go on appointments. And then and I think actually this is kind of where Justin Udy, which is our top agent, where he's heading to, is ultimately getting to where he is spending all of his time going to closings. I know he's not there yet, but that's kind of what he wants to do. And then eventually he even wants to be able to step out of that and just have his team keep running, and where all he's doing is actually taking the check to the bank. That he's not even doing any going to closing. Yeah, right.
How
But-
likely is it that you get to that point in real estate with it being such a relationship related business?
Pretty. Yeah, I don't.
Deep within
it's
your
gonna
soul
be-
and ask yourself questions to get to that point.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be like I say. I've never seen. I think Justin's probably the closest to that I've ever seen of anybody, and I've had the opportunity to work with a number of agents who have done around $1 million a year, and most of them though are not. Their average sales price is usually in the 800, 900, or $1 million. Versus his, I think and I don't know what it is. His maybe 300 or 400 or 500,000. Meaning he's doing a lot more deals, and he's structured his team around it.
Mhm.
So
How does that work? Do they just profit share with their team? I guess.
yeah, they all kind of work a little bit differently, but typically what's happening is if on the team they're giving up a significant portion of the commission. A lot of them it's 50%, right? Off the bat is how it works. Is when it comes in, this commission gets split. I've got active and passive, but 50% and 50%.
I talked to someone the other day that was on a team. He was saying that he just prospects, gets an appointment, and then when the house sells, that he gets his 25%.
Yeah, so that would be similar to what I was saying. Is basically that person is just prospecting, setting appointments for the team leader to go and do this. But this is where the team leader, even though they may not have thought it through, but this is what they're doing, is they've set it up to where they've got somebody doing their indirectly productive so they can spend all their time going out doing these things so that this percentage hopefully could be maybe even trying to get it higher than that.
But so, forgive me.
No, you're fine.
I'm thinking entrepreneurial here.
That's fine.
Do you need your team below you? Do they all have to be licensed?
To prospect? Yes.
Oh, yeah.
To prospect, yes.
Just basically paperwork and stuff like that.
Yeah, they could do to not have a license, all they could do is administrative stuff. Meaning they could answer the phone and set up an appointment for you if somebody called in and said, I want to meet with Curtis. Then they could say, oh yeah, sure, what time would, they could do that, but they can't be calling and saying, hey, we just listed a property over on blah, blah, blah street. You have to be licensed to do that. So yeah, that's just it. That's part of what I love about being here at Century 21 is most companies are very anti-team. They don't want you to set up this type of a thing because it basically is taking profits away from the company. Luckily here, because what happens is if you're on a team, 50% is going to you, 50% here, but then that agent is on a much higher split generally than what you are, and so that money that would have gone to the company now ends up going to the team instead. But George here actually gets it here to say, yeah, but if we do it right in the long run, he's got looking at big picture, not just this quarter or whatever. But so that's to me what I think is great about it here is because we're all pro, go for the team and get that set up. And yeah, is it going to cost the company money? Yes, in the short run. But if we do it right in the long run, it'll all work out.
Be a well-oiled machine.
Exactly. So any other questions on this piece? Then I've just got only one more thing that I just want to run through with you. If there's nothing else, then we'll be done. All right, let me finish up actually one other thought here that I didn't really finish. If I'm telling you should be spending at least 60% of your time doing these things, that still leaves 40% of your time to be spent here, which again, ideally we'd want this to be 80 and 20, but if you start to find yourself below 60 is when you have to kind of start going, red flag, sirens ought to be going off that I'm not prospecting enough and it's going to hurt me in the long run. Does that make sense? That's kind of, but I want to be clear that leaves 40% of your time to be still done non-productive. Now, not unproductive, but non-productive, meaning like a CMA, I would throw a CMA as a non-productive thing to do. Now, remember, that doesn't mean it's not important. It's still, those things are still important and we got to do them. It's just, what things could you pay somebody to do? Here's why. If you really kept track of your time, and this is why I say a lot of the team leaders that are doing that are saying you're just going to prospect and I'll go on the appointments, what they've figured out is as I tracked it for me, here's what I found. And it kind of varies depending on agents. But you should be making between $250 and $500 per hour that you do that. If you kept track of your time of all these things, you're going to find you're somewhere between $250 and $500 per hour is what you're going to be getting paid to go out and do this kind of stuff. Versus, if you just paid somebody to go do a CMA for you, how much would it cost you? What would you have to pay somebody to go just, I mean, even a non-licensed person that you could just say, I'm going to teach you how to do a CMA, sit down at the MLS and put together a CMA for me. What would you have to pay somebody to do that?
$10 an hour.
Yeah, and I would say 10 to 15 maybe bucks an hour. Can you see why we want to spend more time here than we do here?
Yeah.
I mean, when you're sitting down doing, and again, I know out of the gate you're going to have to do some of this, but initially, the more time you spend doing these type of things, you know, checking the emails, doing Facebook ads, putting together a marketing piece, even putting together a flyer to go out door knocking, the more time you spend doing those type of things, you're basically working for $10 to $15 an hour. And stop and think about that, because what I'm telling you is most people are spending 80% of their time in this category. I mean, go get a job at McDonald's. You'll make that much and have less stress, because at least, you know, you get discount on Happy Meals. You know?
So you'll be happy?
Yeah, exactly. So, and there's not really a set amount for prospecting here, but I would say probably if you were, and again, I've never asked one of the team leaders that's got agents that are doing that. My guess is they're probably in the $100 to $125 maybe per hour. That might even be too high to guess that. But you can see why somebody would want to set up a team and say, I'm going to for sure pay people to go do this. Down the road, I'd love to have somebody else doing this for me so I can go make. And my guess is if you were doing only this, your per hour is probably going to be closer to the 500 than the 250. And so, real quick, part of why this range is so big is it depends on price range. I mean, if you're out doing $500,000 homes versus $250,000, it's going to make a difference.
So one of the top guy I know as far as income and selling cars makes about 3 times what the next best guy does for that very reason. That's all he does.
Yeah.
This kind of stuff, closing, and
yeah.
You know, that's it.
Yep, he's just, the people who figure this out and understand the more time I can spend doing this and the less I do of this, you know, that's why, again, one of the other things we have here that most companies don't have is the transaction coordination. Yeah, it costs $295, but to me, if you can pay somebody $295 to take care of all that stuff so you can go out and make, I mean, just even the prospecting part of it. go and prospect for 2 hours. You should make up. You should get an appointment or two that is going to make up the difference of a $295 to a transaction coordination. That's why we do that, is we don't want you spending time in this area. Let them do that. You go out and do these things so you can make the big dollars. That makes sense? So, all right, let's go through real quick and talk about schedule. So what should your schedule look like? Where does your schedule start? What time?
Wake up.
I'm saying it starts before that.
When you go to bed.
Yeah, why? You're exactly right. Why?
Should be planning your
Quality
day
of sleep.
tomorrow.
Well, it's cyclical.
Well, because what happens if you stay up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning? You getting up at
10.
5? 5:30? Yeah, no. So ultimately, here's what I would say is your schedule really needs to start in terms of the night before. Figuring out what time am I going to bed so that I can make sure I get up. You know, a lot of studies have been done of people who are successful typically wake up at what time?
5 a.m.
It's usually sometime in the 5 o'clock hours when all the studies that I've seen on it. So you should be getting up at a somewhat early time. Why? What do you need to do?
Early bird chase gets the worm or whatever.
Yeah.
I need to have my.
Early bird gets the worm, the second mouse gets the cheese, right? So all starts with the night before. So what should you be doing? Let's say that you're getting up sometime in the 5 o'clock-ish hour, okay? What should you be doing during that time?
Gratitude, affirmations, hydrating, exercising.
Yeah, good. So we're going to have all that stuff. So exercise,
Bathing.
maybe we'll say journal or something. So like where you're saying doing some gratitudes and things. What else? Eat.
Dress, shower.
Shower, please shower. I have had one time, so I've been training new agents for 12 years now. I have had one time, and maybe I should have done it more than once, but I have had one time that I had to pull a guy aside and say, nobody wants to sit by you in class because you stink. And so please, now it turns out he had some intestinal things more than you want to know. But the cool thing is he's still in real estate today, and he has lost like 60 pounds from that day when I had that conversation with him. He lost 60 pounds, and still, he looks great now. But he was 60 pounds too heavy. Anyway, so shower, please shower. All of those kind of things, right? And then ultimately, we want you to be at the office, ideally again. We're putting together what the ideal schedule would look like. Be at the office by 7:30. Now, for Anita, everybody else is in this office but Anita, right? So Anita, their morning ascent starts at 8 a.m. Ours here starts at 7:30. So for you, maybe it's 8 a.m. But for us, 7:30, we want to be here for morning ascent, right? Do morning ascent from 7:30 until 8, maybe 8:15, or maybe even let's just say 8:45, because I know you guys are done by 8:45 in Centerville, aren't you?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 7:30 to 8:45 is going to be morning ascent, some role plays, training, stuff like that. By 9 o'clock, you should be prospecting. So prospect from 9 until 11:30 or noon, somewhere in that range, depending on like we have sales meeting on Monday and Wednesday from 11:30 to 12:30. So, but just for the ease, let's just say till noon. So prospect from 9 until noonish. At noon, do lunch. You can stop and do my favorite part at least, go to lunch with somebody, hang out, whatever. 12 till 1. 1 o'clock, what should we do then?
Prospect again. Or
So
return calls.
if you've got appointments in the afternoon or evening, you would maybe spend from 1 o'clock until 2 o'clock, I would say, is going to be your prep time, meaning getting ready for your appointments, okay? To go out and do any of the appointments and things. If you don't have appointments, then I would say you should be doing lead follow-up. So follow up on leads. So lead follow-up and more prospecting. Right? So that's 1 until 2-ish. 2 o'clock until 3 or so. Maybe more prep time, but maybe that you're traveling or whatever, taking a break for a little bit or whatever to get ready to go on appointments. But typically from 3 o'clock on would be appointments. Now, one of the things that George always said that he did was that he would do his appointments with people at 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock, and then twice out of the week he would do a 7 o'clock. So Tuesdays and Thursdays he would have available. So when he was prospecting, he already knew when he wanted his appointments. So he would do 1, 3, 5,
and 7 on Tuesday, Thursday only. So these were Tuesday, Thursday only. So outside of that, he didn't want to be out going on. So if somebody said they couldn't meet till later, great, I do those on Tuesdays and Thursdays. All the rest of the time you do a 1, 3, or a 5 o'clock appointment so that he could be done and be home at a decent time. So to me now, so if during this time, if you have nothing else, I think some good things to do in this afternoon time. One would be doing some more prospecting if there's nothing else going on. But as new agents, I think go out and see properties. So see properties, meaning go out and view properties. I'm trying to talk and right, it wasn't working so well. But go out and see properties, meaning call and schedule an appointment to go out and look at some agents' listings. Call and just say, I want to come out and preview your property. You need to be seeing property. Why? Why would that be important to go look at 2 or 3 houses each day?
Know your market.
Yeah, so that you know what's going on in the market. You can be comfortable with it. So pick an area that you want to be where you're prospecting in. So if you're going to go door knocking and things, I would say do this, is find 2 or 3 expireds or for sale by owners. So let me throw that in here. Expired or FSBO. That what you could do is look those up, find in an area, and then you could actually find a listing that, it doesn't matter if it's Century 21 or any other company, just call and say, I want to come out and preview. Now make sure you use the word preview. I want to preview your property. If you called me and said, hey, I want to preview your listing, what that tells me is you're not bringing a client. You're just going to look at it for a client. And so I'm going to tell my client when I call them, hey, I've got an agent coming out to preview your home, so don't feel like you have to leave. And they're not bringing a client with them. I mean, it's a little different. You don't need to worry about getting all the lights turned on and all that kind of stuff to make it perfect. So just call and say, I want to come out and preview. If they said, are you taking a client with you? Just say, no, I'm just going out to preview it. I just want to go see if it'll work. I mean, whatever, you can say something like that. But then I would say go out and see 2 or 3 properties, but find 2 or 3 expireds in the area that you could go knock on their door and a few of the other doors just around in the area. That's kind of what to me, this is what a schedule, your ideal schedule should look like. And really just kind of deciding what are the times you're going to do your appointments. That way when I am prospecting, you could say, I've got time at 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock, which works better for you. And then you could decide Tuesday, Thursday, or whatever to do a 7 o'clock or something if you want. And just say, if they say, oh, can you do something later? Yeah, Tuesdays, Thursdays. You just want to have a schedule set up for you that you know this is what my schedule is going to look like. And if you do that, it makes it very easy then to just tell people, well, here's when I have openings. Now, what happens though, because I know how you agents work, what happens though when they say, well, none of those work, is there a time we could meet in the morning? Sure. But what does that mean you got to do?
You can move some stuff around.
Yes, that's the key, is if you're going to say yes and go do that, because I know you will, if you're going to do that, say, yeah, well, we can meet at 10 a.m., fine, go do that. Just make sure that what you do then is drop that prospecting down into one of your appointment times. Here's the key. This is the secret to this business. Treat your prospecting like an appointment. Meaning, like Anita brought up an agent coming and chit-chatting. If you had an appointment scheduled with a client, would you ever just sit and, if Pete came over and started talking to me, would I just sit and talk to Pete? If I had an appointment with a client in 5 minutes that I needed to get to that was 5 minutes away,
Get out.
What am I going to say to Pete?
Let's talk another time.
Hey, yeah, I got an appointment. Can we do it another time? See, treat your prospecting like an appointment. Meaning, say, oh, you know what? I've got an appointment right now, Pete. So, how about let's go to lunch or whatever. We can meet during lunch if you want to talk more about that. But I've got an appointment I got to get to right now. He gets up and leaves my office. I close my door and get on the phone and start calling. Or I go get in the car and go drive to wherever I'm going to door knock or whatever.
Well, I believe it boils down to prospecting because it's really the only thing you have control over.
Thank you. Thank you. That is so true. Yet, it's the only thing we have control over, yet it's the one thing that we do what we talked about, and is we work on things in inverse order of their importance. We'll work on the least important things for the most amount of time, and the most important, the least amount of time. So you're exactly right. You need to protect it and say, this right here is the secret to your success in this business. The faster you get started prospecting and the more of it you do. And here's the other thing I would say to keep in mind. Unfortunately, a lot of times agents forget this too, is and this isn't 100%, but typically this takes 90 days to see the results. Now that's not 100% true, because you will pick up, the more prospecting you do, the faster you'll pick up a now person. But keeping in mind, to really get this to start to explode on you, takes about 90 days. So if you want a closing quicker than that, make sure you're doing 60% of your time with this, yeah, or 80.
In Utah, this community, what is the latest you would say don't door knock after?
So for me, I don't know that there's a hard, fast rule, but for me, I always use dusk. So once it starts to get dark,
It's very early in winter.
right. So hopefully, we got plenty of time before that. Make sure that by that time, you're on appointments during that time. So do a ton of prospecting now, so that because that's just it, starting next week, it's gonna be light even later, so you got that extra hour. But for me, I just always felt like once it was starting to get dark, I don't want somebody really knocking on my door at that point. I don't wanna be knocking. But you could, I mean, I've known people that have done it, but
Is there an hour you should stay away because of dinner?
No.
No? Okay.
Just go to the house with the lights on.
Yeah, no,
Front light on.
here's what I will tell you though that I have learned. A lot of times people will say you'll catch more people at home here. Maybe that's true, but I always felt like, for me, when are you the most stressed in your day? In the morning or in the evening? Or afternoon and evening?
Afternoon.
Yeah, that's when all this stuff happens, right? I mean, you're usually more stressed out here. So for me, even though people will say nobody's ever home, I think you're going to catch about 30% of the people home anytime you go. I don't think it matters. Well, here's what I'll tell you. If you went and knocked on my door at my house right now, my wife's there.
Okay.
Tonight, we'll probably be at a baseball game or a baseball practice. We'll be somewhere that you're going to be less likely to. So if you're going to break into my house, that would be the time to do it. Yeah, write it down.
I
So
found just
I just think that.
because
Yeah.
I live like in a pretty, residential, lots of kids. I found the other day when I went out, right when school got out, they started home, so
Oh, yeah.
because a lot of them had kids. So they gotta be there for the kids to get home.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that is the thing I would say. But the downside, yes, they're there. But the downside is
They're busy.
They may
they're
be
they're
busy.
trying to take care of the kids. So to me, who cares? There's never going to be a perfect time. It really is back to decide when you're going to do it and go do it at that time.
Yeah,
So-
there's no
And if you're worried about time, just say, got a minute?
Yeah, and if they say no, great. When would be a good time I could come back and talk to you more about it? Bam, I just got it scheduled.
Yeah,
appointment.
there's gonna be ups and downs. Everything you do.
What?
Everything you do, there's gonna be ups and downs. So
That's
just
right.
do it.
Just do it. Yep. There's no perfect. So the thing I will say, the advantage to door knocking is you're going to be better face to face than over the phone. Typically, most people.
It's harder to slam it on your face than people on the phone.
Mm-hmm. So, but the disadvantage is you got to walk between the doors and things. The advantage on the phone is if you use like Mojo Dialer, if you had Mojo working for you, it's calling 3 numbers at once, and once it connects, then you just pick it up. So you could get your contacts quicker doing something like that, but I also feel like you're going to not be as effective. So it's kind of a balancing act. What?
Fresh air, sunlight.
Yeah, well, today's awesome. So, in fact, we've got an agent here, Jonathan Aubrey. I don't know how many of you know him. He usually sits up here on the front row of Morning Ascent, but he has cerebral palsy. And he talked about how when he first came into the business, he felt like, because he doesn't walk really that great. In fact, a lot of times when it snows, he'll come in a wheelchair, even just so he doesn't slip and falling down. But he's one that he initially was getting on the phone and calling people, and people were saying to him, "Are you drunk? Are you high?" And totally asking questions without seeing him, you wouldn't know. But he felt like, I can't go door knock. And one day he just decided to go out and door knock. He went out and door knocked an apartment building, and while he was knocking on the doors, he said he found people. One guy gave him a hug. Said, "You've inspired me. I mean, I'm sitting here on the couch doing nothing and thinking I don't have a job or whatever, and here you are with all your challenges out knocking on doors." And he said, "Can I give you a hug?" And he was like, but he said he told me, I said for him, that was kind of when the light bulb turned on if I need to go knock on doors instead of being on the phone. Now, you may find for you, maybe you're better on the phone than face to face. I mean, so there's no right or wrong in any of that. It's just a matter of making sure that you stay focused on, I gotta get the prospecting, because that is what drives this whole engine and gets it going. And then we'll kind of finish off this class with this, is as newer agents, you haven't paid the price to have a real flexible schedule, meaning you probably will see some of these top agents, you know, a Jonah, and I'm maybe not even saying him for sure, but you'll see some of these top agents who maybe aren't following as strict as a schedule, but they're making really good money. Well, keep in mind, they've also paid the price to get there, and you haven't yet. But if you will do this and build up your business, you will be able to get to where you've got a lot more control. I always kind of laugh, because I'll hear new agents say the reason they wanted to get into real estate is because I wanted to have control of my time. And I think, yes, you can and you will get to that point, but to begin with, set yourself an extreme schedule that looks something like this and just say, I'm following that schedule and I'm going to stick to it. In fact, one of the other things I laugh about is your family members will always want you to be the one to go drop off somebody at the airport, or can you watch my kid for a little while, because you've got the flexible schedule. But if you'll treat it like a real job and just say, no, this is what my schedule's going to look like, man, the sky's the limit if you'll do that. So anyway, hopefully this has been helpful. I don't remember what the class is on Tuesday off the top of my head, but
I think it's Rep C.
yeah, Rep C workshop, I think it is. So we're going to go through the real estate purchase contract on Tuesday, and then I think Thursday we've got the home inspections.
Can I talk about that?
Oh yeah, I forgot totally. Yeah, so Pete actually has. If you don't have a name tag, he's got kind of a. Well, go ahead. He wanted to talk real quick about the name tag.
So, mortgage company I was working with before, they gave me a name badge. It's beautiful. It's only $4. If you buy 5, it doesn't matter if they're different names, so it can be a group of you. I went around and got like $140 worth divided by $4. How many name badges? It's only $2.95 for shipping and handling. Doesn't matter if you buy 1 or 100. So if you guys are interested in name badges,
Absolutely, I really want one.
So yeah, if you want one, just let Pete know, and then
I think
are you
one
excited?
of them?
no,
Oh.
they're coming tomorrow.
So how long do they take to order?
So we ordered them Tuesday. Did you order one?
Yeah, I ordered two of them.
So
Oh,
Tuesday, and the lady said maybe today, probably tomorrow.
yeah, thank you for that.
So
'cause I
get
know
with
there's
Pete,
somewhere
because
on the
yeah,
website.
as long as we get how many? 10?
5.
5. As long as we get 5 people that want to do it, they're 4.
Then there's
whatever.
just $4. Doesn't matter the name. And there's
Here's your $5.
okay.
So anyway, yeah, let
A
Pete know
little
if you're
story.
interested.
I'm locked out of my computer. I need somebody who knows how to get past Windows 7 password. Then I can help you all out.
I think if you just
Throw it on the ground.
Sounds like